welcome to Coffee with Common Cause. I will start it out. I'm Catherine from Dublin.
And again, nice. Good morning to everyone. I'm just going to mute everyone just for now. There's still folks coming in, so at a clip, quite a clip. So I'm going to leave it another minute. I like all the things in the chat. Everyone's saying hello and good morning. Geauga County in the house. Marilyn from Hillsborough. I have someone from Hillsborough who's doing a rally and is looking for people. So Marilyn, I should send her information to you. Okay, well, why don't we get started? Good morning. Welcome to Coffee with Common Cause. We're so excited that you're here. There's lots to talk about. This is our this is our hello and good morning. Look at all the people that are getting organized and doing things and standing up against this attack on our system of government and our democracy. So this is our good morning and hello slide. And this is our agenda slide. So we are going to talk about some impact of the Doge and the Fire Must campaign, which is coming from Common Cause National. I'm going to talk about State House bills, the SAVE Act, the economic boycott, Sunshine Week. Oops, Steve's shirts. It says probably not, but yes, actually, we are going to talk about Steve's shirt. And I'm muting everybody. If you can just remember to stay muted while you're just coming in. All right, so Common Cause National really wanted to be out front on this really unprecedented thing that is happening in our government. An unelected person suddenly having access to all of the different government departments, firing people, running around with his insane chainsaw. And so Common Cause National started a campaign they are calling the Fire Elon Musk campaign. And one of the things that they were going to do in that campaign was they had a big full double-page ad that you see on the right, who's running this country. And it was going to go on a special, well, I'm going to admit all of these people that are joining. It was going to go on a special wrapper. Apparently, there's a White House version of the Washington Post, and you can purchase a special cover that kind of wraps that. And they were going to spend, a big chunk of change to do this advertisement. And they had a contract and everything. I mean, they had an agreement. And then the Post said, no, you can't do this on our White House version of the paper. They were denied. And so ironically, that ended up giving them much more airtime and much more press and much more attention. There have been stories, throughout the media about the fact that this ad was refused by the Post. There's one from USA Today and one from CNN that we will send, obviously, in our follow-up. So, kind of interesting to read about that. There also is a website. Common Cause National has a website, which is the Fire Elon Musk website. And there's a petition which is going around. Yes, fire Jeff Bezos as well. I heartily agree with that. Unfortunately, he is the owner, but I feel your point there. But there's a petition which I think has, over 300,000 signatures on it. So jump on there, sign the petition, check out the website, read the article. This really is an unprecedented situation. Catherine is the master of political cartoons. So she found this one. I mean, he was a federal employee. The memorial is a national park. Folks are really, it's a lot of distress. So one of the things that we struggle with sometimes is how do we most effectively talk about this? And our friends and partners here in Columbus, Innovation Ohio, do a lot of research about the most effective ways to talk about things that are happening. And I thought this was interesting, them talking about the best way to talk about Doge. So talk about the people, talk about the individual services, talk about the jobs, talk about the opportunity costs about research. If you're talking about the size of government or you're defending institutions or protocols, that's not going to resonate with people. We really need to talk about the individuals and the jobs and the effects that are happening that way. So share stories, share clips on social media. This link here is from Innovation Ohio, and it's just messaging about the House budget. Same thing. Talk about the people affected. Talk about the jobs. Talk about the impact on lives. Don't talk about the institutions because that doesn't resonate with people in the same way. We're right now, the chainsaw is in the hand of the executive branch, and it is taking away the power of the legislative branch for sure. And, we only have to worry that the judicial branch would be next. So in order to try to help with the effort of um, people telling their own stories and communicating in ways that are really effective. We put together a form. Um, Basically, it's just a blank form for folks to be able to put in their story. So if you are a federal worker, if your friend or neighbor is a federal worker, share the form with them. We want to hear their stories because we want those stories to go out into become letters to the editor, become op-eds, become blog posts, become social media posts. And we're happy to help you craft them and get them ready for publication. But we need to hear people talk from the first person and say what happened to them. What job were you doing? What did it mean to you? What does it mean for you suddenly not to have a job? This link that's over here, Federal Workers Tell Their Stories, that is a collection of little videos on YouTube of federal workers saying what they did. And it ranges all the way from the head of cybersecurity at the VA down to somebody picking up garbage at Yosemite. But these are federal workers who had we're doing important jobs, doing them well, and all of a sudden they're fired. And so that's the kind of thing we're looking for, but this is just a form for you to fill out. And I really encourage people. I know a lot of people are afraid because maybe they think they might be fired. But what we want to do is promise you that we would take away any personal identifying information and vet with you absolutely anything before it went, anywhere public. So nobody needs to be afraid to fill out this form. And once we do have some stories, we can begin to share them with other people, with permission. And I think that will really help encourage others. We do have some office hours to help with writing and discussing ideas, Tuesdays and Thursdays for the month of March at noon. We will be available. So we just want to encourage you to do that. So, this really sums it up. This is the richest man in the world taking food from the mouths of the hungry. And destroying lives and just, taking a chainsaw to our government. It's a really scary and we need to do something. We need to change how people are looking at this. And I think personal stories are a really good way of changing how people see what's happening. And even if, some people are saying, oh, there's a crack, it's beginning to change. Well, yes, there is. But we need to take advantage of that crack. We can't sit back and say, oh, okay, everything's fine. We really need to get to work and push to change public opinion um, and end this madness. So that's what we're doing here. We hope you check out the Fire Musk campaign. We hope you tell some stories. We hope you share the link to the YouTube video. That's a really powerful video. Please share it around. It's important. We have a friend who made a lot of shirts for us during the redistricting. He made all of the Citizens Not Politicians shirts and everything. He's a wonderful, small company here in Columbus. And he's been designing some shirts, and you can order them individually. You can go on his website, which is there at the top. And I think Catherine is dropping in the chat, and you can choose the design you want and the size. If you're in Columbus, and you want to save on shipping costs, you can have it delivered to my house and pick it up from me, because Steve will just drop them at my house, and that will save you on postage, and it'll also probably get to you faster. So check out these shirts. We think they're kind of fun. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Catherine to talk about what's happening at the Ohio Statehouse.
Well, and I was thinking about Wenda's fire hose of information. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows that we'll be sure, we're going to send a follow-up. You're going to get all this information and you can read it over. The last few links that I shared were about how Elon Musk will benefit from contracts with the government. And I think it's so important as we think about, the oligarchy, right? As we think about the oligarchy, thinking about, well, what is it that the truly wealthy are getting, and how does it affect us every single day, and how does it affect everything from park services to programs for kids. It's just incredible. The Veterans Administration. And I noticed Lucy said that Jeff Bezos announced that they're no longer going to be doing the kind of pro-con pieces in the Washington Post. And when we think about kind of the slow decline of our democracy, it has paralleled the decline in our newspapers, and we're in really challenging times, and so it's really good that we can get together, share information, think about what we can actually do. And I actually hope you can join us for those writing sessions on Tuesdays and Thursdays, because one of the things that makes a big difference really has to do with the writing and reading and sharing, that people need to know there are other people who are thinking about these things, are trying to work through the challenges. And so I hope you'll join us, either Tuesday or Thursday. It's at noon. We'll share it we'll share this in the follow-up. And with that, we're leaving federal government, and now we're going to talk about the State House. Now, there's a lot of legislation that's going on. So I didn't pick every single piece of legislation that we possibly could have talked about. I just picked a few because I thought that was incredibly important. The first one to think about is Senate Bill 1. Many of you will have heard about this because it's really an attack on higher education, certainly on initiatives that are diversity, equity, inclusion, but it really gets into academic freedom. It ends tenure and chisels away at collective bargaining. So if we remember, Senate Bill 5 of 2011 and that attack overall on collective bargaining and on unions, one of the things that appears to be happening at the State House are multiple bills that are attacking collective bargaining. And this is one of the bills. It has passed the Ohio Senate. Mia, do you remember the number of folks that testified in favor,
Yes.
as opposed to
There were
saying
12
opposition?
There were 12 proponent testimonies submitted or given in person. There were 847 testimonies submitted or spoken that were opponents. And the testimony went for, 8 hours or something. And that was just a fraction of the people who had submitted.
Yeah, so I have to say that the testimony was incredibly moving. One of the things that was clear to me is that people were given an opportunity to speak against it, and it was just a wall. They just had what they had in mind. I think this was a little bit similar if we remember kind of the attacks on direct democracy. So HJR1 or SJR2 of 2023. It was just incredibly painful. It doesn't mean we can't stop it. There are protests that are coming up on the 3rd and 4th at some different state universities to really push back on Senate Bill 1. And I think that's incredibly important. And if there's a university that's near you, please consider going. So then there's Senate Bill 63. So now this one, we don't have ranked choice voting in Ohio. But this is literally legislation prohibiting ranked choice voting. Now, I'm sure some of you are like, well, what is ranked choice voting? Or you're in favor of it and you think, basically it's a different, rather than winner take all. So you basically have, the one who gets the most votes is the winner. You order them. You say, okay, I like this one. I prefer this one. And Denise says they're actively working on ranked choice voting in Cincinnati. And at some point, we could actually include discussing ranked choice voting here. I think there's something really interesting about ranked choice voting, and it is used in democracies other than the United States, where you literally rank the candidates. And it's just bizarre to ban an idea. Like, it's not like the legislature is going to be really slow to move to pass ranked choice voting. To actually ban an idea is just ridiculous. And Lucy was highlighting that ranked choice voting can increase diversity and representation, with elected officials. We know that ranked choice voting is in Alaska and in Maine. And so we should be feeling good about, about the different options. We know our democracy is not working right now. And our legislators are proposing banning an idea. So the other thing that I think is worth really being concerned about and spending some time on, that's Senate Bill 107. Andrew Brenner from Delaware County is proposing that there are partisan labels on the school board races. So you get an R and a D next to the name. Now, we had for the first time those partisan labels on Supreme Court elections and appeals court elections in 2022 and 2024. And one of the things we know is once you put partisan labels on those races, it actually makes them more partisan. And education is one of those things, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, whether you like chocolate ice cream or vanilla ice cream, you want a good education for your kids. You want to be, the partisan label one is truly problematic when it comes to school board races. And Sherry's throwing out, they want to protect their power. And really, a lot of what's happening at the State House is about protecting power. One of the things that is going on is, I know that sometimes you get emails about Article 5 convention. And one of the things we want to do is have a webinar in March or maybe April about the Article 5 convention and what the challenge is. Essentially, we have the right to do another constitutional convention. And you need to get, a number of states to agree. And we are very close to having the number of states that we need to actually hold a constitutional convention. And just imagine just the crazy that could come about once we get into a constitutional convention, because the proponents of this are saying, hey, this is just about limiting federal government. But of course, when you start a constitutional convention, there are no rules. There are no rules in the US Constitution, so they could start talking about everything, including women's rights to vote and like all sorts of things and nonsense that have been proposed as ideas. So we're, very concerned about having a constitutional convention at this point in our life. Um, Carol's holding up a book, Democracy in Chains. We really do need to be, and I highly encourage people to check out that book. It is well worth reading. Carol, did you want to add anything? Because you can come off mute. Okay, no. All right. So one of the things that I think is incredibly important is that we share, we share things. So please, if there's something you've just read or you thought about, please, put it into the chat. I want to make sure that we're sharing good information. This is the other one that I did not include this on the list. But Senate Bill 56, which is the cannabis bill, essentially overturns what we passed in 2024. And it is genuinely problematic because it reduces funding to address addiction, and it reduces what we would think of as personal grow, so that it's essentially corporatizing marijuana, which, one of the benefits of the legislation that was passed by the voters is that there were places you could buy it, but you could also grow it. So if this is something you're concerned about, there's, obviously overturning the will of voters in such a significant way is a challenge. This is not necessarily everybody's issue, but it's worth, if this is something that you are concerned about, this is worth following. You'll notice at the top, there's ohiobills.wtf. This is a space that Rachel Coyle, who is how the State House works, she put together, all the different bills to look at. Now, she clearly has an opinion, and so I encourage you to say, okay, I agree with this or I don't agree with this, but she's listed all the things that are worth thinking about and looking at. So one of the things that Kim asked was, when you send the presentation to everyone, do you include what's written in the chat? I will include all of the things that are about, for example, all of the links, but I'll also include, like, if there's a suggestion for a book, I'll also include that. Or if there's an article that somebody shares, I'll be sure to include that. And so any of the links. The other thing, I mentioned the Ohio Bills .wtf. I would spend a little time looking that whole thing over if you're wondering what's happening at the State House, because she breaks it down in a way where you can really get a lot of good information very quickly. And then during those writing hours, if you want to join us during a writing hour to talk about, well, I'd like to do some writing about this specific bill. I'd like to do a letter to the editor. I'd like to work on testimony. We can also do that as well. So please join us. That's noon Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then finally, we have this really weird thing that happened this week. The transportation budget which we were very surprised to discover, included a provision addressing voting. Essentially what it did is it made it so that if you no longer had a driver's license, the board of the BMV would actually send information to the Board of Elections, and you would be marked as having to vote provisionally. Now, okay, well, who are the folks that are the most likely no longer to have a driver's license? These are older people, right? And actually, since there are multiple ways to prove who you are, for example, your passport, military ID, etc., the idea that not having a driver's license for 6 months should put your voter registration status in jeopardy was really problematic. So, we spent some time, Kelly, Dufour, who, we'll be talking a little bit later, she spent time down at the State House. She did some testimony. Now what happened is they stripped it out of the bill. So thank goodness they did strip that out of the bill. But, um, but at the same time, Kelly is at the State House, and I'm actually gonna Kelly, if you wanna jump in. Kelly's at the State House, and she couldn't see the second version, meaning she couldn't see they said they stripped it out, but she couldn't actually look at the amended version of House Bill 54. Kelly, are there things you wanted to add?
I am here. Can you hear me?
We
Yeah.
can.
Yes,
Hi.
great. I had some technical difficulties this morning, but hi everyone. Yes, it was interesting, and it was definitely a first for me. And so we had heard late on Friday that there were changes to the transportation budget that included elections. We, spent the weekend trying to figure out what that was and what the implications are and what the current code is, and prep our testimony and submit that on Monday. And by Tuesday morning, when we showed up, they were like, "Oh, hey, we've worked out last night a new sub bill, so we're going to reverse this one, and then we're going to introduce this other one. But don't worry, it has a lot less in it." And they didn't even read the language. It turned out, I guess they did. I didn't realize that was the limit of the language, but there was a lot of work behind the scenes. Unfortunately, not in front of the public to um, distill down what they think is an appropriate amount of BMV, what I would call interference into voter registration eligibility. And so, yes, like I was just trying to talk to people in the room about, what has just happened and what is in there. So when we got up to testify, we had some idea. So our stance was that we still were in opposition to any voter stipulations and different law changes in a transportation budget. So that part really didn't change. And, we're still looking into it. I'm guessing the BMV will definitely have their attorneys looking into it because for the first time, it gives the BMV authority to, based on their records, decide if if someone is eligible to register to vote. And it's kind of a weird place. And this is one way, which is, I guess, less worse than it could have been, but one way that the states are trying to get their arms around non-citizen voting, which we know is very rare. And we also know that there are a lot of protections in place already to prevent that. So it is very frustrating that anything got through, and we will watch to see how it develops on the House floor next week, and then I'm guessing into the Senate, and it's just something we'll definitely keep an eye on.
Catherine, Sally Francis mentioned in the chat to me about another bill, which we had kind of opted not to put on here, but I just think it's worth just bringing up, if that's
Oh,
okay.
please.
So Senate Bill 53 is a kind of anti-protest bill. It came up last year and didn't move forward. And it basically what it does is that it criminalizes protesting, and it makes it moves the burden of proof onto the the accused, as and also you can end up being financially liable for damage at a protest even if you weren't there. There's all kinds of kind of sinister ways of taking away our freedom to protest, that is such an important part of our American tradition. Right now the bill isn't moving, so that's why we didn't include it, but we certainly are keeping an eye on it. That's Senate Bill 53. All right, Catherine, do you
Oh,
want?
Sherry has something to say.
Yeah.
Sherry, do you know how to come off mute? There we go.
Hi, good morning. Um, I wanted to alert everybody this business about the BMV and your voting. When we received our new policy for car insurance, there was a note that they were not going to insure our son, who still lives with us, because there was something on his driving record that precluded them from insuring him, that he had lost his driver's license, which is ludicrous because he didn't. So after a lot of digging, we ended up at the Parma BMV, and we paid $10 to get a document that stated that he had no points and no dings on his driver's license. We sent that to the insurance company, who then reinstated him. And I guess my warning for everybody is to pay attention to your driver's insurance. And if it says anything about your driver's license, this was a third party that nobody had ever heard of. The woman at the BMV never heard of it. The insurance, the underwriter had heard of it, but didn't understand where it came from. So I just wanted to issue that warning to everybody, and I felt like that was too long to put in the chat.
Okay, very good.
Well, thank you. Well, and I think it's as we think about that kind of challenge, it just highlights the challenge of different agencies and different bills that are focused on a specific topic, like a transportation budget, and including information about voting into the transportation budget. I mean, there's so many different ways to screw things up. Let's leave it to the committees where they actually deal with elections and candidates. As Bill says, data brokers can make bad assumptions.
Okay, if I move on to the next slide.
Oh, yes, please.
All righty. And I think this is Kelly.
Hey, this is me. Okay. And so, what we're seeing at the state level is definitely playing out in larger and grander scale, in a grander scale in the federal level. And I just wanted to mention that, it may seem obvious to some people, oh, sure, the BMV is already collecting information. Let's just send that on to the Secretary of State. Well, just for context, the laws that they changed last year haven't even taken effect yet, where the BMV would go from hard copy record to actually doing electronic reporting. So right now they're printing off voter registrations and sending those to the BOEs and to the boards of elections. And so, there's already going to be a giant leap in procedural change and everybody getting used to a new system. So they just keep layering and layering things that they think are a good idea without even really recognizing, how it's going to disenfranchise or just really overburden agencies also. So we are, I saw in the comments a couple concerns about the SAVE Act, and so we wanted to, definitely hit on that. Unfortunately, that has been reintroduced into Congress in January. We're being told it's fast-tracked, and there will possibly be a hearing soon in the House. Again, this is the national documentary proof of citizenship requirement. So this would be a passport or birth certificate to register to vote. Not a hospital birth certificate, but a vital statistics certified birth certificate that some of us might not have. We know, as voting advocates, that it would disproportionately impact many groups of people, younger voters, older voters, low income, some lower education level voters, African Americans, and folks that, for whatever reason, don't have a passport. In addition to not having a passport to prove, citizenship, there are an estimated 146 million people, American citizens, that don't have that, on top of 21 million that don't have readily accessible documents to even, to pursue a federal requirement. Now everybody's going through a Real ID. Our Ohio Real ID is supposed to be required this May. We're not sure if that will be delayed again, but the Real ID is something they've been working on since 9/11. And it's been more than a decade in the making. And so changes are very slow. And this is really a giant change to a lot of processes. So definitely impacts voters. Women, 84% of married women change their names. Their name would no longer match their birth certificate. We could go to the next slide. In addition to harming voters, right, excluding millions of voters, creating confusion when you register, having problems bringing your documents just due to lack of necessary paperwork, it also threatens election workers. So election workers could face criminal and civil penalties if they make administrative mistakes by letting, not even letting, but just by unknowingly having, a record go through that's not supposed to. So very extreme penalties for election workers, which will then, increase strain on them. It's already a strained system. It'll increase, possibly increase the turnover of those workers and reduce some of the institutional knowledge that's there already. And then, overall, it just also undermines voter registration and the voting process. So it would do things like curbing online voter registration, which is used in over 40 states. It would end automatic voter registration and registration drives. So we'd no longer be able to do mass registration advocacy days. And it would dilute the National Voter Registration Act, which was meant to capture the folks, that are disadvantaged when they do have a routine transaction and can be asked for registering. And there's just numerous, we could go on all day probably about the SAVE Act. It increases purges, the opportunities for states to go in and just re-examine the files over and over again. And then obviously there would be the potential for mistakes. So people being flagged and unflagged, or their status changing and needing to be corrected month after month before elections, and all the folks that have birth dates that would be renewing things before an election that would then be cut out of a stream of data. So all these reporting and logistical nightmares that keep some of us up at night. So we are not looking forward to this moving forward, but it is definitely something we all should keep track of and keep our eyes out for. I think we have an action on the next slide. Yep. So Common Cause has an action that I'm sure is in the chat, and you can take action by emailing your representatives today, and then maybe there's the switchboard number where you can call your House representative tomorrow and try and get through. We're being told, and I saw in the comments that it's really tough to get through to your representatives now. But we just need to keep trying. We actually also have a tool in there for your local. You can actually look through Common Cause for all your representatives from federal to local, and it includes BMV information now. I looked at it last night and I was interested that it had some local BOE boards of elections office members if you needed to get in touch with them at a local level. So we have a lot of tools and resources, and again, this is ongoing. We believe that we're lining up someone from the Campaign Legal Center to come to our Ohio Voter Rights Coalition meeting, which would be next Friday at noon, and hopefully get into a little bit more of the detail and answer all the very complicated questions to this situation. Thanks.
And I just want to jump in and say, the fact that this will disenfranchise a lot of people, that's not an error. That's the goal of this legislation. The goal of this legislation is to reduce the size of the electorate. And when you think about how many people register on campus, with voter registration groups, or at their church, and you think about every single person having to go into the BOE when they register to vote, clearly this is not about making sure that every eligible voter can cast a ballot. That's the opposite of what it's about. And yes, many, many people will not be able to prove citizenship, but that doesn't mean, I just want to be clear, like if you're a married woman and you have changed your name, for example, in Ohio, your license, if it has your current name, and you are a citizen, it indicates on your license if you're a non-citizen. So that you already have that piece of ID. If you have a veterans or military ID or a passport already, it's people that are going to try now to get the document that they need to be able to show citizenship. Those folks are, it's going to be tricky for them. There are organizations, Vote Riders is a great organization that helps people get documents that they need in order to be able to vote or prove citizenship. And obviously, if something like this would happen, all of us would be out there trying to help people get the ID that they need to prove their citizenship. But it would be an uphill battle for a lot of people. It's really tricky. So, you know, this is such a draconian measure. And when I always think about the fact that not that long ago, not only did we not have to show ID, there were times, I mean, in some places you don't even have to register. So it's getting, you know, bit by bit by bit, it's getting harder and harder and harder to vote. And the question about people who are currently registered, it's not really clear in the law. The people who are already registered and on the rolls, but didn't show proof of citizenship in the past when they registered, we're not sure what their status would be, if they would have to go in order to show citizenship in order to remain on the rolls, or if they, you know, they would need to show citizenship, let's say if they changed address. That's not really clear.
And Mia, if I could just say for a second,
Yeah.
the sub bill that was actually introduced into the transportation department was exactly an effort like this, trying to get around, you know, trying to get proof of citizenship on the books, but in a way where every BMV transaction for a license would require and even re-registrations would require proof of citizenship. So, you know, states aren't thinking it through. The people are trying to just rush through what they think is the fastest way to get this information so that they can track people. But it's really harmful and just logistically just a nightmare for everybody.
Fun. Okay, so I'm going to talk for just a second about the economic blackout. And I've seen some things in the chat where people are saying, like, how do I find out about protests? And, you know, how do we know what's going on? And I think the unprecedented nature of what's happening right now is meaning that a lot of things are just popping up, and it's really hard to know how to find out about them and how to get the good information. So I'm sure many of you have heard about this in economic blackout, and some of you haven't heard about it. And the truth is, there isn't like a single verified source of information. It's kind of crowdsourced, but certainly there is a large, there are many different groups across the country and individuals who have said, kind of just to make a point, that they are not going to spend any money on Friday. So that's tomorrow. They're not going to spend money at Amazon, Walmart, Target, etc. And these are some of the guidelines. Don't make purchases, don't shop online, try to get stuff today. If you think you're going to need it tomorrow, fill up on gas, spread the message. And what is the point of this? It's really to show that, you know, we're paying attention and we have some power. Now, you know, there are other boycotts and protests and things that I've seen going around. And the question of, you know, where to get information. If you have a local activist group that you trust, you know, get on their newsletter, you know, see if you can get information from them. If there's, you know, if you're on Facebook or Blue Sky or some other social media and you see messages going around, you know, see if you trust the organization. I think a lot of the big organizations have been hesitant to kind of weigh in because we're a pretty cautious society in terms of wanting to know, like, well, who's responsible if something goes wrong? Who's going to take responsibility? But we're kind of at the point where everybody just needs to just go out in the street, go to your local protest, do your thing, because there really isn't there isn't an organized opposition to this because, and that's because so much is happening and it's so chaotic. And that's part of the point, is to get us all confused and not knowing which way to turn. So my suggestion is, if you are able to participate in a protest, or you want to have your own protest, or you want to put a little sign on your car that says, I don't support Elon Musk or whatever it is, do it. Because time is ticking away, and damage is being done. So Common Cause National has kind of given us the go-ahead to say, yes, please join the economic blackout. But, even if they hadn't, I hope that you can make your own decision about that, and try to follow along. If you want advice about, places in Ohio that you can get good information, let me know. I can try to put you in touch with a local activist organization. The protests, like, honestly, I just have been finding out about them on, they just seem to pop up online. They are being done by a group. Sorry, I'm trying to type in the chat here. This organization, again, totally decentralized, 50-51. That's like 50 states, 50 capitals, one protest. You can find information online if you look up at 50-51. I know, for example, there is a kind of No Kings protest going on March 3rd and March 4th. There's nationwide, there's a Stand Up for Science marches on March 7th. In Columbus, that's going to be noon to 3 at the Statehouse on March 7th, Stand Up for Science. I think there's going to be just one after the other. Certainly Indivisible is a good source in a lot of locations for some information about these protests. They aren't, yes, that's fine, Wenda. I don't really have a great link for the economic blackout. There's a Facebook group about it, but it's not really 100% clear who they are. So yeah, and exactly.
You know what? I was going to say, Mia, I even said, hey, we'll post this up on our Facebook so that people can share it.
Yeah.
So once we get off.
Things like Bernie Moreno. So in Cleveland and in Columbus, both are doing Wednesdays in front of the office. So if you want it's hard for me to promise to tell you because I often don't know. I mean, I know some of them, but they sort of just pop up. But the ones that we know, we will try to share with you. And if you have a question about a particular area, let me know. I'm not sure about Youngstown, but I will try to find out. And if I'm going to put my email in the chat, and then if you have questions about a particular area, let me know. And with that, I will move.
Sounds like the kind of thing that I was talking about, the kind of power of crowdsourcing. It just highlights that this is truly a movement, as opposed to kind of when things are truly not planned by the folks that are generally organizing things, or there are a whole bunch of different activities happening organically by organizations. It's just a sign that people are fed up and they want, there are all sorts of different ways we can take action. So one of the things we could do is actually try to compile information about all of the different protests that are coming up. We will include, the protests, certainly the defending science protests that's coming up, so that we all know. And I just wanted to say thank you to you all as we're going through this time period. I think it's so important to keep going even when things are hard. And there are a lot of people who've decided to opt out, and you all didn't do that. And so let's make sure that we stay together, that we do what we can to build community. And with that, Mia, do you want to go to the next slide?
Yes. And I did just put in the chat a link to sign up for a newsletter that will have some good information, and I'll put a little bit more in the chat.
So many of you will know that Sunshine Week falls the third week of March every single year. It's something that reporters, essentially journalists, started years ago with the idea that we need to really honor open government. We need to be pushing for open records. We need to ensure that we have good open meetings. And so this year, Sunshine Week is March 16th to the 22nd. And I always think, we really need to think about how much transparency we need to be sure that we can address corruption. So we can be sure that we find ways that we can participate, not just on election day, that open government is truly essential for that. And so, Mia, if you'll go to the next slide, I did want to give you an update. So the last time we did Coffee with Common Cause, we talked about how there's these new rules at the State House that really make it a lot harder to navigate the State House. So I mentioned, like, Kelly goes, to testify. They change the bill, but they don't show it to the public that's there to testify. They don't post the change until yesterday afternoon, long after it was passed, the day before. So that there are lots of ways that we are kept out of the process and the ability to actually make an impact on, as they're making really important policy for us day to day. And so the whole notion that a session calendar can be set at any time, where before there was only 24 hours notice, but there was a 24-hour notice. That at any moment, the committee amendments can be submitted at any time. Well, just imagine how difficult it is to impact the process if at any moment they can change things. And then there's this protests. I don't know if any of you have went to the protests, for example, on, SJR2 on HRJR1 in 2023. So those were the attacks on direct democracy that would have made it harder, the 60%, and essentially would have made it significantly harder for us to do citizen initiatives. Well, the people were in the rotunda, and Mia was leading with a bullhorn as we walked around, and the area that was really important in many ways was that space that was outside the chamber, so that the noise could be heard inside. So as they were having the vote, they would know how the people were actually feeling. And so clearly it demonstrates the power of protest, because they would not be shutting down essentially that area outside the House chamber if we're not for us. Anyway, so the update is that on Sunday, there was an insert in the dispatch that listed all of the organizations that were opposed to the new legislation, the new rules for the State House. Now, it's slow going. It's hard work at the State House. But we're trying a bunch of different things that we didn't that we didn't do before, to try to push on the leadership of the House and the Senate so that they'll do better. And then, so Marilyn was asking, is Coffee with Common Cause going to become a regular thing? So we'll do this again on March 27th at 8:30 a.m. So hopefully you'll join us then. And we'll have other updates. Hopefully we'll have a good update when it comes to what's going on with the rules and transparency at the State House. So also in March, Mia, if you're willing to move to the next slide, I wanted to highlight that we have a webinar on March 20th at 6 p.m. So this is a Wednesday. We always try to do something to celebrate, Sunshine Week. And this time I was really interested in including Randy Ludlow. If you've done any of the webinars with us over the years during Sunshine Week, Randy Ludlow is a retired reporter. He is an expert on public records. He did a blog for a long time about, how to get records. When you look at his bio on the Dispatch, which is still up, it says he's an old school muckraker with 50 years of experience. He's somebody who has a really good sense of all of the challenges, and he thinks about local government, he thinks about state government, federal government. I think he's going to talk about is like, well, how to do a public records request, but we're also going to do a panel where they talk generally about kind of the importance of transparency in government, some of the challenges. I also am excited that Fred Gittes is joining us. So many of you will know his name. He's a local attorney in Columbus, a good public records advocate. Specifically, he is a pro bono attorney for the Center for Media and Democracy. And the Center for Media and Democracy has been trying to get public records from the Attorney General Dave Yost since 2020. And they wanted to know what was, the records related to the Republican Attorney General's Association. So many of us have heard of like the Republican Governors Association, but there's a Republican Attorney General's Association, and the Center for Media Democracy made a request for these documents, and they were essentially told no by Yost's office, and it has worked its way all the way to the Ohio Supreme Court. And so Fred will talk about like, well, what exactly was that about? Center for Media Democracy does a lot of research trying to figure out what's happening behind the scenes. They're very interested in dark money and the use of these kinds of associations to influence all sorts of policymaking. So I think, he's going to be a really good decision. And then Natalie Fahmy, who's a reporter with NBC4, is also going to join us. And she is the new president of the Statehouse Correspondents. And I was going to say she's just a wonderful young reporter, and I think she will be a lovely addition to the panel to talk about kind of transparency in government. So I hope you'll join us on March 20th. And then last but not least, Mia.
Well, yeah, I think this is our last slide. So it's just kind of summing up some of the actions you've seen earlier about the SAVE Act, something about the post office, very important. There's a sign-on letter about those State House rules, a link to our office hours sessions for writing help. We do have every other Friday, we have a Ohio Voter Rights Coalition has a meeting where we just talk about legislation that's come up and other things relating to voting rights. It's at noon, and you're welcome to join. And then that's the link for the Sunshine Week webinar panel discussion that Catherine was just talking about. There's so much in the chat. We will make sure to, send you both this recording and links and all of the useful things that we can. If you have individual questions about, how to get information in your area, that kind of thing, we will do our best to answer you. What else? Anything else we need to cover? Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate you being here. We appreciate your questions and your support of the work that we're doing as well. We really do. And I agree
Mia,
with
a quick question.
Elisa. Yeah.
About supporting you. That's actually my question. Like when we donate, is it local, state, federal level? Like actually guidance on how we support you financially as well would be helpful.
If you go to Common Cause Ohio, that, our website, I'm sure that someone is just about to pop it in the chat, and you donate to Common Cause Ohio, it does come to Ohio. So that is,
I should also be super clear that when you support national, like if you know that it's just going to Common Cause, that doesn't mean that some of it doesn't get to Common Cause Ohio. So certainly we're familiar with entities where the local is not affiliated very closely. We're affiliated closely, And so they do in fact support our work, and it kind of depends on what we're doing. Some years Common Cause Ohio has a little more money than others, and we don't need as much support. And so it's one of the nice things. So that means that a state that really is struggling, I was going to say right now, for example, Common Cause North Carolina is just in the midst of an enormous fight. And so when the money goes to national, they're getting a little more money right now, just because they really need it. And so I think that's the other way to think about it. So I don't want to say only give to Common Cause Ohio, because there is something important about supporting kind of, for example, the Elon Musk campaign, etc. And thank you so much for being supportive. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Michael Barron put in the Common Cause donate. But if you do it, but there is the option, just saying, there is the option also to do Common Cause Ohio if you're on our website. The letter writing hours are virtual. We don't really know how they'll go. If one person comes, that's great. If 15 people show up, we'll make another plan that might be a little complicated. We'll just figure it out as we go along. And
you have a Zoom and I have a Zoom, so we could even
Yes.
split up if we needed to.
Yeah, indeed. Or do
'Cause
breakout rooms.
it is true. Like, I'm so happy to see so many of us, but we do know that if we're a smaller group, sometimes it's a little easier.
And I for example, with the Ohio Voter Rights Coalition, there's a lot of organizations here in Ohio that are working on similar things and pushing back against this nonsense. And I'm sure you all know them all and support them all. But yes, Linda just put in the chat ACLU. There are so many great organizations, and we work together both on things relating to the State House and things that are from the federal government. So, but it's going to take, right now with the situation that we're in, it's going to take everybody doing things that we are not used to doing in order to try to stop what's going on. So thank you so much. We are 3 minutes over. So I'm going to say goodbye. Have a wonderful rest of your day. We're going to work on the follow-up and try to include everything, and we will see you all very soon.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
It's
Good to
Catherine.
see you.
Bye. Thanks so much.
Be well.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. And I know we didn't get to everything, so send your suggestions early for March 27th. Thank you.